This election season has Democrats vying for the same city council seat and a race that could tip the balance of power at City Hall. At the county level, a seat held by Ron Roberts since before the turn of the century will go to one of two veteran politicians well known to San Diegans. Plus, San Diego's bishop gets an earful about the Catholic Church's sexual abuse scandals. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, reporter Andrew Keats of Voice of San Diego, John Sepulvedo, morning host of KQED's California Report, and KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen. There are two notable battles and races for San Diego City Council this election season. One involves a pair of Democrats. The other could enhance power of Democrats on the council. And we'll start in District 4, a tight race between two Democrats. So, Andy Keats, remind us who's running and describe the communities where District 4 is.
So we're talking about southeastern San Diego. It's lower income relative to the rest of the city, largely minority community. It is historically the seat of the African American community, although that actually is not the largest racial demographic in the district anymore. We've got Council President Myrtle Cole going up against challenger and her former staffer, Monica Montgomery, who's also an ACLU organizer and an attorney.
And Myrtle Cole is the rare incumbent who actually could lose. Why is she vulnerable?
Yeah, so we have to be careful about being too expectant of a flip here. No incumbent has lost in the San Diego City Council since the early 90s.
That's the 1990s, right?
Yes, that is the 1990s, right. And but Myrtle Cole did lose in the primary. Now, she lost by a handful of votes, but Monica Montgomery, a challenger who does not have a great deal of financial support, doesn't have a great deal of major party endorsements, major labor endorsements, those sorts of things are all with Cole, and nonetheless, Monica Montgomery was able to come out ahead in that primary.
Okay, and some of the main complaints from local progressives about
So Myrtle Cole really stepped in it about 2 years ago, and I think that is the most high-profile problem that she has, when she said some statements that were basically in defense ideologically of racial profiling, saying that she said basically the reason that young black men in District 4 are getting pulled over disproportionately is because they're the ones committing the crimes. Obviously, that was a very controversial statement, but I think it would be a mistake to think that is entirely what is motivating opposition to her and support for Monica Montgomery. If you spend much time in the district, people who live there have a laundry list of concerns. They think Myrtle Cole doesn't spend enough time in the district. KPBS report quantified that and showed that that was true. She was spending the least time in her district of any city council member. And there's just a lot of issues. It's an underinvested community. People are sick and tired of the same power centers in the district being able to maintain control and never really changing much of anything.
Yeah, and I think, there's this perception that Cole is a moderate and that Monica Montgomery is the more progressive choice. And, we could debate that, but there are a couple examples of how Cole has actually held back or failed to put forward or move forward some progressive ideas on the council. She's not just the council president, she also chairs the City Council's Rules Committee, which determines what issues make it onto the ballot. So there was a measure to sort of beef up and give more strength to the Community Review Board on Police Practices, which is the sort of civilian oversight body that reviews complaints against police officers. That faced a number of delays in her committee, and by the time it got to the full council, there was really no chance of the city doing the kind of preparation work that would be needed to actually get it on the ballot. And there was another example of an affordable housing bond that went to her Rules Committee, and she had it on an agenda and then took it off the agenda. It faced some other delays, and that proposal ultimately failed to ever make it to the full city council because the proponents had withdrawn it because it didn't have the support and the sort of preparation work that it needed. So I think that, there are a couple examples of Cole, issues that voters in her district would ostensibly support, but Cole failed to really see them through to completion.
You know what's really interesting, just
John?
What we're seeing in that district, which you're both reporting, is a failure to respond to the people in the district. And it doesn't matter if it's Dana Rohrabacher, who's the congressional Republican in Orange County, or we're hearing people in Georgia. we are seeing people respond at the local level in a very angry fashion to people who are not spending time in their district, whatever the office is.
And what are some of the key issues in this district, Andy?
I think it's really nuts and bolts government stuff. People want more investment in infrastructure. They want affordable housing. There's a lot of, I mean, they want good jobs. There's a long-running concern in District 4 that there just aren't any good local restaurants where you could sit down and have a meal that isn't a taco shop or a fast food restaurant. Grocery stores continue to be a concern. There's an off-cited study that 50% of all retail spending by District 4 residents happens outside of District 4. People would like to see that money stay and see if you can have some local people start businesses and thrive there.
Okay. Well, let's look at the other race here that's contentious here, at least to a degree, and that's in District 2. Tell us, Andrew, who's running there and what are the boundaries of that district?
Yeah, so the district stretches from Point Loma up to Pacific Beach and includes a couple of neighborhoods east of the Interstate 5. The incumbent is Lori Zaff. She's a Republican, first elected in 2010, generally seen as pro-business, skeptical of unions. Her challenger is Dr. Jen Campbell. She's a physician, also practiced acupuncture for a number of years, and she is a Democrat. So this is, whereas District 4 was a Democrat-Democrat race, this is one that could actually tip the scale and flip a district from red to blue.
Okay, and remind us, what's the balance right now?
Well, the city council has a 5-vote majority for Democrats, for Republicans. So if the Democrats were successful in electing Jen Campbell to this seat, that would give the Democrats a 6-vote majority on the council, which would allow them to override any vetoes of legislation that Mayor Kevin Faulconer could potentially do, which is he's a Republican.
And Lori Zaff's in the odd position of being able to run for a third term when you're termed out after 2.
Yeah, so she was first elected in 2010, as I mentioned. That was the same year that voters decided to retain the strong mayor form of government, which also added a 9th city council district. And her district was redrawn to include the beach communities. So because she ran originally in a different district and then was reelected in 2014 in the coastal district, that doesn't count. The first term doesn't count towards her 2-term limit.
Okay, so she's already been there as long as a lot of council members, when they're termed out. What achievements does she point to here?
Well, she's worked really well with the mayor. She works for the mayor, basically. She's a reliable vote with the Republicans on the city council, and she gets along well with the pro-business groups and their various efforts over the years. I think the same caveats apply with the incumbency effect, and we should be very careful of expecting anything to flip. They just usually don't, and so it's always a good bet to bet on that continuing. But to your point about the national environment and the way people are reacting to local politics, I think this is the race locally that is most resembles the national environment. By my understanding, the polling is pretty overwhelming that the Republican designation is a drag on Lori Zaff. If you look at her mailers and the campaign she's running, she's obviously trying very hard to distance herself from that. Her most popular mailer that you see all the time is her cleaning up a riverbed in a kayak, and she says that she stands against the Trump agenda to increase oil drilling off the coast. This is a coastal district. She's been able to sit there for the last 4 years, in a large part by the incumbency effect. But if there's going to be an area that flips, this is a good one to look at, because I think you've got a lot of motivated Democrats who are going to be out to vote and might be aware for the first time that Jen Campbell is the Democratic option, whereas in years past, you just go and you see the council member name underneath the ballot
title.
So
you asked about her accomplishments. I asked her recently in an interview what her proudest Ms. Zaff, what her proudest accomplishments were. She didn't mention any particular policies or legislation that she has sort of shepherded through the city council. She spoke of volunteering and working with community groups. She talked about she originally ran for city council because the city had been cutting library hours and rec center hours during the recession, and she wanted to preserve that. Now, that has been preserved. I'm not sure how much credit she can personally take for that, but we were talking earlier about connecting with your constituents. Lori Zaff is very present in that district. I think that she has a lot of, she's built relationships with various community organizations in District 2, and I think that certainly speaks for something, regardless of her party affiliation and whether or not we see a blue wave this November.
Right, and she hopes that'll pay off. All right, well, we're going to move on to the county now, another contentious race. At $6.2 billion, the San Diego County budget dwarfs that of the city, yet actions by the city council and mayor seem to get far more attention. In the spotlight now are two candidates vying to replace longtime county supervisor Ron Roberts. Nathan Fleischer says it's time for a Democrat on the all-Republican board. Former District Attorney Bonnie DeMonis favors the Republican status quo. And Andrew, you interviewed both of them, but start with the nature of this district. It's kind of fairly liberal, right? And Roberts was a moderate to liberal Republican.
Yeah, he was first elected in 1994 and has easily won re-election ever since then. It is a fairly low-profile seat for the amount of power that it has. And so, that definitely favors incumbency. So he's really sailed through a re-election every chance he's gotten. Now that he's termed out, we can take a new look at this district and how it's changed over the years, and it has heavily favored Democrats in terms of voter registration.
Okay,
and this, we should mention, this district also it includes the urban core of San Diego, downtown. I believe it stretches over to La Jolla as well.
Okay, so you would expect, no surprise, that it would favor Democrats as it's changed over the years he's been there. So both Fletcher and DeMonis talked about the housing crisis. What do they talk about in terms of solutions?
Well, both of them say that the county should play a bigger role in addressing the housing crisis. They both say that the county needs to permit more market rate and subsidized affordable housing. The county's authority to permit home building is limited, however, to the unincorporated areas which are outside of the city's urban core. So, the debate at the county level is whether the county should be allowing more greenfield development, allowing more homes to be built in undeveloped land in the sort of backcountry.
Which would increase the sprawl, and that's a big concern.
Well, yeah, so I asked specifically about a proposal that the county board just recently approved, Newland Sierra, which would allow more than 2,000 homes in North County on undeveloped land. Nathan Fletcher said this was absolutely not the type of housing that San Diego needs, that we should be focusing more on infill development. Developments like this will put more cars on the road and have them drive longer distances, which would increase greenhouse gas emissions. Bonnie DeMonis, when given the opportunity, did not say that this was the wrong type of housing. She said, basically that the county needs housing wherever it can get it, and that I believe her exact words were, if we get 2,000 homes, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Andy? I interviewed Bonnie DeMonis not too long ago, and we asked her about where she stood on Lilac Hills Ranch, another very similar type of project in North County. And she said, well, I don't really know yet. And I said, well, how did you vote on it in 2016? Lilac Hills Ranch was on the ballot directly in 2016. It failed. It went away for a little while, and now it's back. And she said, I don't think I got an opportunity to vote on that based on where I lived, which was not accurate. The entire county voted on it. So I think you could say that maybe that is not the area that she is most passionate about, and not exactly the motivation for her running for office.
Andrew, I wanted to ask you about in your interview, they tout their experience here. How do they pitch themselves for the supervisor job?
Well, Nathan Fletcher says he's the agent of change on the county board. So it's an all-Republican board, as we mentioned. Many incumbents have been there for quite a while. And that he says that Bonnie DeMonis would be sort of a continuation of all of the sort of culture that we've seen at the county for all this time. She has been endorsed by all 5 sitting county supervisors. And he says, I'm the agent that could actually shake things up at the county board and actually try to get things to change. Bonnie DeMonis, on the other hand, says that she has more experience. She's been at the county for a lot longer, mostly in the district attorney's office. She, says that she has not, I think we're talking about party affiliation here and how much that plays into local politics, but she is also kind of distancing herself from her Republican Party affiliation. She says that she's been a progressive with criminal justice reform. I think some criminal justice reform advocates might dispute that, but, she says, she's a maverick, and she won't be just another reliable Republican vote on the board, I think.
Yeah, well, and that is an interesting way they distinguish them. Speaking of endorsements, I think the UT came out and endorsed Fletcher here just recently.
Yeah, and they kind of echoed that sentiment that Nathan Fletcher will be the agent of change.
Yeah. Anybody who's been around for the last 6 or 7 years since Nathan Fletcher's been running for mayor will note that the transformation of the editorial board's position on him is quite remarkable.
Well, I was actually going to say something else. What's remarkable is the change in the Union Tribune, which is a whole nother topic. But I was actually just recently visiting with editors there. There's a different culture there. I think that endorsement of Nathan Fletcher actually kind of recognizes.
Well, I left there going on 11 years ago, and it's 5 owners since the one when I was there. So you talk about change. It is interesting, and change in that whole district too, as you're talking about, because it's as we said, Roberts really was more a moderate to liberal.
I really think we're also just seeing generally a change in expectations of what the county should be doing. Mm-hmm. You mentioned their role approving private housing in the unincorporated area. There's an increasing expectation that they should be involved, bringing their own pocketbook, basically, to build homelessness solutions, transitional housing solutions, affordable housing solutions in all parts of the county, whether it's in their unincorporated area or in the city of San Diego.
And if we judge the candidates by their public statements, there's not a whole lot of difference between them. They both say that the county should be spending more of its reserve dollars, less of a focus on the credit rating, and both of them say that the county needs to invest more money in subsidized affordable housing, also using county properties that can sometimes be leveraged with developers for more development.
Yeah, a third of that budget goes to public health. We've talked about the Hep A issue a lot on this and that outbreak and the county's role in that. And there's a lot of, and of course, mental health and law enforcement go hand in hand. There's a lot of issues there that the county's involved in.
Yeah, and so on Hep A, when we spoke to both of the candidates, Fletcher was much more quick to criticize the County Board of Supervisors for their role in that outbreak. He said, they were asleep at the wheel, that they were too busy voting themselves pay increases. Demanis
looking after the Chargers and keeping them here with the stadium, that sort of thing.
And Demanis kind of acknowledged that mistakes were made, let's say, that Hep A kicked our butt, but she didn't really place the blame on those 5 county supervisors.
Okay, couple seconds left. I know polling sketchy in races like this. Any idea here? No incumbent in this race.
No incumbent, but given the demographics, I would say that Fletcher's the favorite, but it's not to dismiss Demanis by any means.
Oh, it's going to be exciting election night period between now and then. We are going to move on now. Well, sexual abuse of children by Roman Catholic priests continues to roil communities across America. San Diego is no exception. It's a diocese that paid nearly $200 million to settle with dozens of abuse victims 10 years ago. They sued over incidents of sexual abuse and cover-ups going back many decades here. Now, Bishop Robert McElroy, who was not here during the lawsuits and the settlements, is on a listening tour. And John, you were at the first one of these here, kind of interesting. Start with the purpose of this tour. Why is the bishop out there?
So the tour is basically to listen to parishioners, listen to their concerns, to address concerns. There are a couple really important points. One, it does not seem that there are any new cases. 2, I actually spoke to the district attorney, Summer Stephan. She said that they have been working with the Catholic Church since the bishop has been in his position, and that of all the places in San Diego right now, she feels very confident that that is one of the places among the priests where reporting would happen very quickly and to the point. They're all very aware of that. And the other thing is McElroy has been a agent of change for this diocese. Like he has really gotten in there, cleaned up house, and in fact, the reason we know that there are 8 folks who are on this list is in large part because of his push, which began before the Pennsylvania report came out.
8 new priests accused of, some of them dead, accused of abuse in the past. Yeah.
Right, and so we've seen a lot of this type of pro-action. Now, there's a lot of criticism of him for his leadership position within the California Conference, and we can get into that another time. But his message is essentially, I'm here, I want to know what your questions are, I want to know what your concerns are, because the Catholic Church here essentially released 8 names of people that had not been publicly identified. What it turned into, the listening session.
Yeah, set the scene for us there.
Yeah.
The atmosphere and how many people were there.
So there were so many people there that at first I couldn't get in. They said they were at maximum capacity. I, of course, was perhaps not dressed the most news professional, but they were essentially telling me that no, you can't come in. Had to have the PR person come over. There was armed security guards there, which I found to be very interesting, and they were able to get me in. And when I got in, I was greeted, not personally, but within this room, 350 people, most of them incredibly angry at the Catholic Church. And I thought they were going to be angry for the sex abuse, and there was that. But these folks were really angry about Pope Francis and the bishop being more permissive, as they saw, towards LGBTQ issues. I personally was kind of shocked.
That was surprising to a number of people.
Yeah, I was. And I was actually surprised with how, and they acknowledged this as much, but there was some very bigoted language being used within this discussion.
That's a good point to set up this bite we have. Cameras were allowed in only at the beginning here, and 10 News provided us with a little clip that shows about that atmosphere.
Okay.
And no one was aware of any allegation against Cardinal McCarrick about abuse of a minor until this past summer. And at that point, it was investigated.
Okay, so you can hear the boos there, the outright kind of hostility.
Yeah. But as it went on, it devolved, and it really devolved into. I heard a lot of people say that Bishop McElroy in particular had encouraged this culture of homosexuality, the subculture of homosexuality. They wrongly, and I want to make this very clear because there's absolutely no evidence that any sexual orientation or any presentation of gender has anything to do with abusing children.
Reporters like me who covered this for years and have read and interviewed experts extensively over the years, pedophilia is the core issue here. It has really nothing to do with homosexuality.
At all. And I want to make that really clear to everyone who's watching. But that link was wrongly made over and over and over again. And, the citing of Leviticus and and what was interesting is I actually covered the Catholic Church and kind of the demise of the Catholic Church in Ireland when I lived there. Ireland's a very Catholic country. But it was a lot of the same things that I saw there is because the Catholic Church has been moving in this direction, people who are perhaps more progressive or more open-minded, they actually kind of leave the church. They go to other branches, they don't go to church. And what's left is with this core conservative group who, as we saw, this week, they're very angry.
So are the attendees of this listening session, or would you say that they're representative of the direction of the Catholic Church or the laity of the Catholic Church in general in the United States or in San Diego?
I don't know because I haven't been in Catholic Church in San Diego in a long time. Sorry, Father. But what it is, I saw there was about 2/3 who were hostile, and there was a third who was trying to speak up. To the bishop's credit, he spoke up, and it's clear that Pope Francis against this kind of bigotry, and it's clear Pope Francis is moving in a direction towards that. The problem is that the growth of the church, and this is a much bigger problem than San Diego, the growth of the church is in places like Africa, Southwest Asia, Southeast Asia, and South America, which tend to be culturally more conservative. So right now we're seeing a Catholic Church on a progressive kind of bent, regardless of all the criticism for Pope Francis. But the question is will that be what goes forward? Because while that's where the growth of the church is, the money comes still from the Western European and the United States country, and United States as a country.
And the bishop, he had to push back and resist. I mean, what generally was his response?
The first thing he did was affirm that the Bible teaches, according to the Bible, that the only allowed sexual action is between a man and a woman who are married. And that's according to the Bible. But he didn't spend a lot of time on that. He really spent a lot of time talking about how we're all children of God, how everyone deserves to be seen in front of God on their own terms. He made it very clear that if a priest who happens to be gay comes to him and promises to be chaste, that he'll be happy to help that priest get ordained. And that really drew, I mean...
That must have got a
I was surprised people weren't taking their shoe off at that point, because they were like, people were angry. They were legit angry. At one point, one of the people I was sitting next to, the guy started yelling, interrupting. He threw his papers down, stormed out. There was a lot of that kind of anger around it.
And I'm just thinking, this doesn't really jive with my, at least what I've heard about the political direction of the Catholic Church and where it's headed. The Catholics in the United States are often quite progressive on some issues, not all, but some. And so I'm just wondering, do you think that this, listening sessions like this tend to attract the most angry on both sides? Would you say that I don't know, of your perceptions of the audience, were they older? Were they,
They were older. They based on the amount of bling they had on, they weren't really following the whole like temperance with money thing. And this is a more conservative area, but I do find that it seemed about right. Like, for whatever reasons, many Catholics have not accepted where the United States has gone on the issue of same-sex marriage, on the issue of inclusion, on they just haven't gone there yet. And I'm saying that, my legal name is John Paul, and my brother's is James David, and my other brother's Thomas Joseph. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty silly. But like, I think that what's more concerning to me is that the perpetuation of that linking between somebody's identity and someone's sexuality to child abuse is not only wrong, but it's dangerous. That's how bad things happen to people in the community.
We're just about out of time, so we're going to leave it there. But I should note there's more to the listening tour and several other churches to go here.
That's right.
Bishop. Yeah. We'll see what happens if we follow up on coverage on that. Fascinating story. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories here at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Andrew Keats of Voice of San Diego, John Sepulvedo of KQED's California Report, and Andrew Bowen of KPBS News. And a reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.